Okay, let's just dive right into this high-yield crash course on the absolute fundamentals of psychology. If you're gearing up for a big test, or honestly, if you just want to really master how the human mind works, this explainer is completely designed to get you fully prepped and confident. We're going to distill the essential definitions, the major historical shifts, and the modern applications right from the source text, so you can absolutely crush your exam. Let's get into it.
Here is our blueprint for today. 1. Defining psychology's core. 2. Those crucial distinctions you absolutely gotta know. 3. The evolution of psychological thought. And 4. Modern branches of psychology.
All right, Section 1, Defining Psychology's Core.
So, historically, you might have heard that the word psychology comes from the Greek words psyche, meaning soul, and logos, meaning science. But, modern psychology has evolved way beyond that. Formally, it's a scientific discipline that systematically uses both biological and social sciences to study three very specific pillars: mental processes, experiences, and behavior. Let's break each of those down.
First up, we've got mental processes. Basically, these are the internal states of consciousness you use when you're, say, actively trying to solve a tough math problem, memorizing facts for this exact exam, or just perceiving the world around you. Now, it's super tempting to just label this as brain activity, right? And sure, brain imaging shows us actual physical neural activity when we think. But the two are interdependent, not identical. Even when you're fast asleep and dreaming, your mental processes are actively humming along.
The second pillar is experiences. And the most absolutely fascinating thing to remember here is that experiences are entirely subjective. Like, only the person actually going through it can truly know their own state of awareness. Psychologists study the whole spectrum, from the deep pain of grief to the high of a romantic encounter, or even the esoteric experiences of a meditating yogi. And remember, context is literally everything here. The text gives a great example. If you're stuck on a crowded, sweltering bus, you'd usually feel pretty miserable. But if you're on that exact same hot bus heading to an awesome picnic with your best friends, your internal conditions totally change, and you might not experience that discomfort at all.
The third and final pillar is behavior. This really just boils down to how we respond to the world. It can be a totally simple reflex action, like your eyes instantly blinking when something is tossed at you. Or it could be a highly complex decision, like choosing to go to a movie with a friend. Ultimately, all behaviors are triggered by some kind of stimulus, whether that's something in the environment around you or an internal change.
Moving on to Section 2, Crucial Distinctions. Okay, this right here is a huge trap on exams, confusing the mind with the brain. For decades, the mind was actually kind of taboo in psychology because, well, you couldn't physically locate it. So we have to ask, are they exactly the same thing?
The short answer, no way. Think of the brain as your physical hardware. It has an actual structure and measurable, observable neural activity. The mind, on the other hand, is this non-physical entity. It emerges and evolves dynamically as all your interactions and experiences get organized into a complex system. The source text points out some truly wild cases, like patients who actually had their occipital lobes, that's the part of the brain responsible for vision, surgically removed, but they could still correctly respond to visual cues. It just brilliantly shows that while the mind obviously can't exist without the brain, it functions as its own completely separate dynamic entity.
Here's another essential distinction to nail down: overt versus covert behavior. Definitely pay close attention to this one. Overt behavior is what anyone can outwardly see or sense, like literally running away when you spot a tiger. Covert behavior, though, is internal and completely unseen by anyone else. Imagine you're in a super tense situation in a game of chess. An observer might just see you sitting perfectly still, but covertly, your hand muscles might be micro-twitching as your mind silently experimenting with a move. They are both behaviors, and they're both triggered by a stimulus.
All right, Section 3, Evolution of Psychological Thought.
To ace this exam, you really need a solid mental map of this historical sprint. Think of it like a giant pendulum swing. We started with early ideas like structuralism, swung incredibly hard away from the mind entirely into strict behaviorism, and then eventually synthesized everything into the modern cognitive perspective. So around 1910, this massive shift happened. Behaviorists like John Watson, who was heavily influenced by physiologists like Ivan Pavlov, just completely threw out the concepts of the mind and consciousness. Watson basically argued that because the mind is unobservable, studying it is just way too subjective.
He flat out declared that scientific psychology had to focus strictly on what we could objectively measure, behaviors, or specifically the stimulus-response association. Later on, B.F. Skinner popularized this exact approach, applying it everywhere. But eventually, the pendulum swung back. Psychologists realized, we really can't just ignore our internal workings. And that birthed the cognitive perspective, which brings the focus right back to cognition, the whole process of knowing, perceiving, and problem solving. It was around this time some cognitive psychologists started viewing the human mind essentially like an active information processing computer that receives, transforms, stores, and retrieves data.
Now, nestled within this cognitive realm emerged constructivism, the idea that we actively construct our minds through exploration. But this sparked a massive debate among theorists. In one corner, you have Piaget, who argued that children actively build their own minds quite independently by exploring their physical and social worlds. But in the other corner, the Russian psychologist Vygotsky argued something totally different, that the mind is a joint cultural construction, completely formed through interactions between children and adults. It's a classic debate you'll definitely need to know for the test.
And that brings us to Section 4, Modern Branches of Psychology. For your exam, you need to be able to identify these key domains rapid fire. Cognitive psychology focuses on both lab and real-world studies of things like memory and reasoning. Developmental psychology looks at how we physically, socially, and mentally change across our entire lifespan. Social psychology dives into how we're affected by our social environments, things like conformity and group attitudes. And environmental psychology, that looks at how physical factors like temperature, pollution, or even just the layout of your office interact with human behavior. But honestly, what makes all this theory so incredibly powerful is how practical it is. Psychology provides real, tangible tools for everyday life. Just look at psychoneuroimmunology, a discipline literally studying how the mind strengthens the immune system. Studies by researchers like Ornish actually show that patients with blocked arteries who used positive mental imagery, literally visualizing blood flowing smoothly through their arteries, experienced significant physical relief. That is wild. From curing irrational phobias with mental imagery to giving you the exact strategies you need to improve your study habits and lower your exam stress right this second, psychology is deeply embedded in everything we do. After going through all these rigorous scientific methods and strict classifications, I really love this quote from the writer Norman Cousins. He perfectly encapsulates why we study this in the first place, saying, "The growth of the human mind is still high adventure, in many ways the highest adventure on Earth. It really is a continuous, incredible journey of discovery."
So, as you head into your exam, keep this in mind. The definitions of mental processes and behavior aren't just dry vocabulary words. They are literally the source code of human nature. You now know the basic mechanics of your own mind. So the question is, how will you use this new understanding to navigate your own daily adventures? Best of luck on the test and keep exploring.